Okay, hi everyone. My name is Rich Wiles. I am Shape Maryland president. Uh, Joining me today and helping me kind of keep track of everything is Jason Semenoff. He is one of our Shape board members, and he's going to be helping us out. So we're going to kind of be working today. Thank you for signing up. We have had over 900 and almost 50 people sign up for this webinar series. This has been our biggest one this summer so far. So I hope you all enjoy it. Today is going to be kind of a different subject. Maryland is kind of in a transition. So when you were going to register for the webinars, you saw that Maryland is offering free membership. Maryland is working off a free membership base this year. We're trying to really support our teachers. So if you want to become a Shape Maryland member this year, you can sign up for this year. We're also asking if you want to donate anything, just go to the website shapemaryland.org and you can donate at any point in time. Donations are what we're using to kind of fund all of this professional development moving forward. So please kind of get yourself ready. We're going to kind of go through all these different slides. I'm going to kind of show you like my setup from the spring and where I'm going to kind of go for the fall so that we are ready to roll. So today we're going to be talking about synchronous and asynchronous teaching models in phys ed. So two words, they kind of been around, but they're kind of making a way back around in education. They've been around with online learning for a long time. So we're going to start talking about these different topics as we go. If you have any questions, we'll have kind of pause breaks through this hour, kind of hitting it. But that's kind of the way we're going to focus on this. So we're going to be really focusing on this right now. That's my contact info if you need to reach me. The last one's on Twitter. I normally respond to private messages on Twitter faster than I respond to my own email some days. So I have a bad habit of that. So most people know that if you've been around with me. Today, we're going to really focus on, and the big thing we're going to focus on is just still continuing to support quality physical education. If you saw our Shape Strong presentation back in June, one thing we've been really focusing on here at Shape Maryland is really good, solid skills-based health education, also very much physical education, just quality physical education. And the biggest thing is in the spring, a lot of us kind of focused on really focusing on physical activity and kind of exercise. We had a lot of fitness logs. We had a lot of different things going where they weren't really physical education. They were more of a physical activity patch to get us through the spring. Because in March, when we all got thrown into this virtual environment, it was really a challenge for us. So one of our big things we want to focus on is making sure that with the synchronous and asynchronous learning occurring, that physical education is still meeting the same quality. If you joined us back in June, one of our big things that we talked about was how policy right now is affecting everything we do. Policy, we went from, having schools filled with students in numerous environments where we were interacting with students daily face-to-face to where we now barely see kids. We're all virtual or we're in some type of a hybrid, and some school districts are still face-to-face. But traditionally here in Maryland, most systems have gone to virtual learning for a period of time. That then impacts your curriculum, which then impacts your appropriate instruction and your student assessment. So our goal here today is to kind of help you kind of work through some of these different concepts with the two models that you're probably going to see a lot of if you're doing hybrid learning or if you're doing what's called e-learning online. So the hardest thing we had was all of our models that we had, and these are kind of some of the ones that came off the top of my head. We have a standards-based approach, fitness education approach, skill 3 approach, sport ed model. You got Hellison, movement ed, character ed, health ed model. All the different models that were there, they kind of had, they were great models. But the problem with most of our models we had was they were small group games, whole group games, or partner activities. And that kind of is where our brain has been. We've been sharing equipment. We've been really working hard. And we were having those issues like where now we don't have that. With hybrid learning and e-learning, the problem is we're really having students work individually more and more. They're not going to have as much equipment, or if any equipment. And there's going to be a space limitation. We're presenting, inside right now from my house. Most people are going to be doing some lessons inside, or they'll be having to go outside, but Wi-Fi gets spotty there. And some of this is kind of going to really impact our instruction because we've been so equipment based. We've been so integrated with people. So we're really going to kind of focus on that today, how synchronous learning and asynchronous learning kind of affected what we've done, but we can still do what we do, just in a different approach. So the first thing we're talking about is synchronous teaching. Synchronous teaching is kind of the hotbed one that is going around. Synchronous teaching is your real-time learning. So synchronous teaching means you're face-to-face with your kids. We don't have the 3-second delay like TV, so you have to behave. You have to make sure your backdrop is appropriate. You're ready to kind of teach, making sure everything works well. And synchronous has its advantages. Synchronous learning, it allows for students to have live student interaction. So our students can interact with us, they're just going to be behind their computer screen. It has the ability to be dynamic learning, so you can move around and you can kind of move and do it. It also allows for more of in-depth and depth of learning. You can kind of talk to your students, you can still have a conversation with a student, but your conversation might be either a student's digital hand being raised on their screen, or they're going to have a way where they're going to have to use a chat box to talk with you. There's many different forms of communication that can be built with synchronous learning. You just have to find the model that's going to work for you. We can also evaluate students' form and skill while they're doing it in front of you. You could do that with your equipment, very easy way to work it. But the challenge with synchronous learning is they sometimes have a hard time for students. It's hard to give individual feedback. You can't really just say, Johnny, your form isn't looking that great at that moment. You're gonna have to find a way to kind of work out that. Technical issues. Maryland, we had tropical storms horrible yesterday, and I was glad the internet stayed on in our section of the neighborhood yesterday. You're gonna have these issues. But also you're gonna have that big schedule that is set up there, and that schedule is going to be challenging sometimes if you have multiple kids in a household with limited devices. So that's kind of where synchronous learning can be the pros and cons of it. Synchronous learning is a little different than asynchronous. Asynchronous learning is a self-paced learning. Asynchronous learning is what a lot of your professional development were that you did in the spring. Asynchronous learning is very simple. Asynchronous learning has its pro. It has the ability to be flexible. Kids can do it at their own time. They can work on their own time. They can work at their own self-pacing. They can take the assessments when they're ready. So it really is nice because it has that flexibility. If you only had one computer in the house, kids can work on it multiple different steps. So it's going to be kind of there. So people, by the way, before I move on, are asking about the slides. Everything will come out in email to you. The slides will come out in email to you tonight or tomorrow morning with the presentation too. So, and it'll be all posted on Shape Maryland. So the challenges of asynchronous teaching are kids are in isolation. They're not going to interact as much with students. They are in their own world. They have to do the work on their own pace. You probably create a video, you can create something like that, but the feedback's going to be delayed. I know I had a problem with that feedback in the what's called spring. The feedback was an issue when you got 300 different pieces of feedback and you couldn't get in touch with your students so quickly. Some days I feel like you missed one or two too, and it was very challenging. Also, the thing with asynchronous teaching is the student has to be self-motivated. One thing we saw here in our county was students were very motivated when we had grading, but when we switched over to satisfactory or no grade, it became a challenge. Some students just kind of did the bare minimum to pass themselves by at that point. So it's a very challenging, it's very, you know, it has its pros, it has its cons in both the learning styles that we have there. So one of the big things with either of these models is how many times are you going to see your kids this year? I mean, that's really one of the challenges you need to start thinking about first when you're doing either synchronous or asynchronous learning. Are you going to have them for 18 weeks, one semester? You know, you can then have 18 times that you can hit units, concepts, or lessons with the kids. Are you going to have them a whole year for 36 weeks? Or are you going to have like a hybrid model where you have 36 online and then 36 where they're asynchronous, kind of working on their lessons? So you could see them 72 times, but it might be in different mediums. So it's just something you might have to start thinking about in your brain is where you're going. Some of the tools that tools are going to be kind of important. If you're home or if you can go into school, your tools are going to look different than you had in the past. One thing that I'm using right now tool-wise is my camera is duct taped to my monitor at the moment because my tripod is not here at the moment. And you're going to have to kind of work with your tools. So some tools that are really easy to look at are possibly looking at getting a green screen. A green screen is a very simple e-learning tool that you might want to look at. Green screens allow you to have a background so that it can look like your school. It could also look like different things that are going on so that it's kind of blocking out what's really in your house. If you're using Google Classroom, the backdrop is going to have like a blurred vision or a different vision that you can look at. It looks professional. And also if you're making like an asynchronous lesson or learning activity, you then can make your own videos. You can add in different characters and different things like that. So a very simple tool that you probably want to get. Another tool that is possible is you might want to look at doing like a selfie light ring. If you don't have good lighting in your house or in your room, sometimes putting that light behind your monitor, it would really help illuminate your area. If there's a guy on the Twitter, it's like Room Raiders, it's called, he evaluates people's lighting and how the room looks for news right now. One of the big things most people have is an issue with the lighting in their room. So the idea is to try to have yourself in a nice lit room, and it works really well. So it's a really simple way of doing it. They're not expensive. Supposedly they're hiding at $5 Below. I could not find one this morning at $5 Below, but I know Amazon has them too. The last thing that I really like is having a good just camera. I know a lot of people work off their laptops and they have that angle that's going kind of up on you. A wired camera is really nice. I've had a couple of wired cameras over the years. I like them because they have a built-in microphone, so they have pretty clear reception. Also, their picture's really clear. It's a very simple kind of tool. They're normally about 35 to 50 bucks, but you can also then have a remote. Some of them, the newer ones, have a remote, so they tilt up, tilt down. The angle works well if you're teaching in that scenario. So it's a really easy, simple way. Somebody said you can use an Xbox Connect too. Sweet, I don't have one of them. But that's something you could do. It's really simple. The nice thing with it is it allows you to kind of change your placement. So if you wanted to use two cameras, one on your laptop when you're talking and then having one when you're moving, it really works well. But it's just kind of a simple way of changing your angles, changing the way you kind of work that when you're doing your teaching materials for e-learning. One of the big things I work with, and one thing I really relied heavily on in the spring was, and I think you can see it, I just got to tilt my camera down, was I really focused on using a monitor, and I could then have visual demonstrations with my students. A lot of people have TVs already in their house or in their gyms. You just have to play with the lighting on the TV. White backgrounds don't do well with pixelation, but it's a really simple way where you can have a screen, just like you're on the news or people at home, you can have it. You might just have to play with your angle. Kind of how you're doing it. In the future, I'd like to kind of bring mine over a little bit, but also having two teachers in the house, it's going to kind of make it a little more interesting with synchronous learning this year in my world. So we're trying to build that as we go. But monitors, a second monitor is nice too, so that you can see your students if you want to talk to them through like a Google Classroom display, or if you want to have it a different way. So very simple way to approach different things we're talking about. So synchronous teaching is the real-time teaching, and really, this is where we're kind of going. So all these tools that you have, after you lay out how many days you're going to have during the year, synchronous teaching is really just thinking differently about what we do. It's really kind of simple. The way it works is you're going to be talking to yourself. You're not going to have as much feedback from your students unless you have mute off on all your students, which that becomes its own interesting world. But online teaching is a little different. So the nice thing is with real-time sync, you kind of have to act like you're on an old, horrible 80s TV show where you're talking to yourself and you're also giving yourself feedback really quickly. So some of the things you might want to look at is how long you're going to do your synchronous teaching model with your students. And one of the things that you're really going to focus on with your synchronous model, if the elementary level or if you're doing it with the middle school, high school level, is students need to know what they need to bring to class. Just like any other class, they need their list of materials. So our list of materials is very simple. Our list of materials is, we have in our lesson, I would say you need to send it to them about 48 hours ahead so they know what they're going to have. So if a kid needs a ball, which I'm going to show you in a couple minutes, they might need a certain piece of equipment or what they might have to make or what they might have to use. And also you kind of have to think of what kids might have in their house. Every kid's in a different scenario of what they're doing. Synchronous lessons could be anywhere. I would say 20 is a good short lesson, 45 is a good long lesson. They're going to be in there based upon your time. And the lesson you're going to see today is a very simple lesson. And it works is this is just a standard one. This is a throwing and catching lesson. It's a very simple one. I'm going to keep my ball under control while throwing and catching. So you can do these lessons at home. You just have to kind of set up your classroom. And the way it's going to look different is you're going to kind of have to time yourself, and you're really going to have to focus on when you're doing asynchronous lessons, like almost have like a timesheet out, like when you were student teaching, and kind of posting like when you want to do your intro, what are you going to do? What are we learning today? You know, what's your warm up, your skill development, lesson focus, your learning checkpoints in the lesson, really focus on that closure and making sure you have that feedback and reflection. So your lesson, it's like you almost want to have a script. It's like you're a news person that you kind of want to have ready set up for you. It would work. So synchronous learning, it's just very simple. And the thing is you have to think is you're doing this stuff already. It's just the way you're approaching it's going to be different. Instead of having your kids sitting in front of you, they're sitting in front of a screen. So that kind of gives you a little different limitation of what you're doing. But like, here's a good example for our warm up. So today we're doing underhand throwing, your very simple warm up that you could do with your students. This is from Mike Ginicola. It's very simple. This is Kung Fu Fitness he has. So you're not in the same room as your students, but you could do this game together. You could do, it's like rock, paper, scissors, but you would do 1, 2, 3, or you can use, it's Karate Kid Kai, and you would do it, and then you'll go 1, 2, 3, and if you have a spear hand, claw, or fist. A kid could do the exact same thing on their screen in front of you. So you could still do rock, paper, scissors. You could also then get students to do different things where they're doing the different activities in front of you. So it's very simple. So you can take old activities that you did at school and you could really focus them here. The key is you need to make sure that when you're teaching, you're using your space also in thinking about their space, because that's going to be the challenge. So this activity would be very simple to do. Another great simple activity, and there's a ton of these out here. This one's from Kevin Tiller, very simple mind missing letter activity. You could do a different activity where you do it as together as a group, or a kid could individually go and do it as together, but it would just be an easy way that they can do their warm-up. So they put the missing letter into the blanks as a simple warm-up. It reinforces those skills that the classroom teachers would need too. Just a simple way, really focused on it. So for a classroom design, so this is what I would focus on in one lesson, and this is just very basic stuff. And the thing is, you then could do this visually with your students. So I'm gonna stop screen sharing, wherever my screen sharing tech, hey man, that thing went flying across this. So, sorry guys, my screen sharing just went running away. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing and you should see me now. You all see me? Yes, perfect. Awesome. Okay, so you have to think about your distance of when you're going to do your schooling. So I would say the biggest thing you need to remind the students in your distance of where you're going to be, you need to kind of have an area that's going to be a safe area. That's going to be a really important thing with elementary kids as you move forward, is having that safe area. Also, having those equipment that they're going to use. It depends on their thing. So they might be able to have a ball, they might have a sock ball, or, you know, they could use a beach ball. They can use any type of variety of equipment as long as it's going to work with the lesson. You might have to modify what you're doing. The nice thing is you can still do this. You could have your music set up, just kind of play with your volume controls. You could have your music set up. You can still do your demonstration. So you can do, so boys and girls, if it's a high, you're going to have your thumbs in. If it's low, your thumbs are going to be down and they're going to be out. So, and then you're going to bring it into your body. So you can still demonstrate all your different skills with your video, and you're right there. And the nice thing is you could do this, you can do your explanation of your skill, and then after you do it, you can have them turn the music on, you can do your turn your camera off, or you can maybe set up a GIF on your screen, and then you can have it where kids are watching, you know, practicing right in front of you in a controlled environment inside. So they can do it with the different activities that they have. You could also project behind you a different set of examples, or you could link it into your chat of if they needed extra help with the cues. You put in those nuts and bolts cues, you could have them there all ready for you. But it's very simple. You can do that with any different piece of equipment you have at the elementary level. The hardest thing you have to do is you just have to remember to really focus on space with students. Ceiling height could be an issue. Also, if you're in an apartment complex, bouncing a ball could be a challenging issue. So it's just something you have to think about in your lesson. But you could do your activity, music stops, you can ask your students for feedback, you can have them put it in many different ways, and then they can then go back. But you can go back and forth with your students. So it's a very simple way that we're looking at doing this. Any questions so far, Jason, while I swing back to the other, need to find my camera. There we are. So another thing, so it's a very simple way you can focus if you're in a synchronous environment. The thing is, you just have to think it's a learning experience. You're gonna have to kind of change how you've done it as you've gone forward. Back to our screen. So everybody should see my screen now. So one of the big things also is your checks are going to be different because you're having a hard time with students. They can use, so supposedly in Google Meet, your new features you'll have is students can raise their hand. If you're in Zoom, you can do that. You can add polling into it as you go throughout your lesson too, which is a very simple way. But some other things that are out there that you can use, and especially in the Google world, is you can use a thing called Jamboard. Jamboard's a very simple app. It is connected to your Google for Educators. It's set in there, so all you can do is put sticky notes. You can draw on it, you can write on it. Really easy way students can upload things. If you're doing a check for understanding and you want individual feedback after that synchronized class, a lot of people, I uploaded a lot of my documents last year into Google so that they could work on multiple devices, like the whole worksheet, and then the kids could draw on it, or they could then color on it or write their comments. Physpedagogy, they did a nice Google form for completing challenges. It was all laid out there. It's on their website. It's very simple, and it is it's easy to use. Checking in with my guy. So it works really, really simple. It's a very easy checks, but checks can be done just like they were in class, but now they're just virtual. So you can have these different pieces of technology in place as you're doing your synchronized lessons, sorry. And they're very simple. But those are things you might have to think about as you go through the synchronous learning pieces. At the high school level or middle school level, you're still doing the same thing, but your equipment might look different, or if you're teaching more of a fitness education or fitness for life model, you need to think about the different ways you're going to do it too. You know, a lot of people had questions about weight training in the past. You know, weight training and different things like that are very simple. So for a middle school, high school lesson, you could show proper form and safety, but you would just have to use things that you have around the house. Very simple approach that you'd have to look at with your thing. Your lessons might be a little bit longer. It depends on your A-day, B-day, or whatever type of schedule that you have, or your trimesters, or the many different ways we teach. So they're very simply set up. Synchronous lesson, you could start off with a very simple warm-up. You could do a partner warm-up. You could assign kids a partner on or video or numbers, or you could say every other screen. You could find out different ways to do one of these AMREP partner workouts. Or you could have students do it as just as one person. So your first round, you can do squats in one spot. You then can do a jog in place for the second activity. Then you can work on perfectly modified push-ups. You as an educator can model them real quick. You just have to change that camera angle, work it there, figure out how you're going to really focus on it. That's kind of a simple way that you could focus on the different ways that you're going to work at the middle school, high school. A lot of people, the weight training had the questions. You could use PVC, or a lot of people have just a basic broom. You could still work on your form. You can work on, you know, your clean. You can work on all your different lifts. There's your joke for the day. You can work on your squat positioning. You have the ability to kind of use the materials that you have, and you can still teach your different ways of teaching. So you just have to think of body weight exercises. You need to make sure you're thinking of, what's it called? Just using what you have. Also, this is a really good time in the middle school and high school world where we have been really heavily focused on like a team sports aspect or sports education model. You're going to have to find a way to kind of make them work in your own student self-centered area where they're going to work on their skills individually. Hopefully at some point when we do get back to where we can have more of a contact environment where you can play more small-sided games, we can get back to those. But for now, you're gonna have to focus on that, but you also can start focusing on that physical literacy concept of keeping kids active for life. Right now, bikes are being sold out everywhere. All Trails, the hiking app, is being used consistently. There's all these new advantages that we can do. You can still teach outdoor education. You can still do it. It's just, you're gonna have to change the mind frame of how you're doing it with the synchronous learning online. So those are some of the ideas that we have there. Same thing, assessment. You can use the same simple tools. If you have any other tools that would be good for the group, please add them to the group chat so they can see them. It'll really help out also. So that kind of explains synchronous learning. So synchronous learning, it's real time. You just have to think about talking to yourself, you have to kind of figure out ways that you're going to really give feedback to your students working really well. The next type of learning we're going to talk about is asynchronous learning. Asynchronous learning, I think asynchronous learning has a really cool piece. I like self-paced lessons. I think I could have done my whole college experience that way sometimes. So it's a very easy way of approaching. Asynchronous lessons are very simple. The way they work is they're self-paced. I would say the most current version is asynchronous model using bit emojis. They're very simple. I know Chris is on, and I stole his picture online, but bit emojis are very simple. They're very easy to use, and kids can really, the younger grades especially, really like them, which is really awesome. And they're very simple. It's a good way to get your kids started. So this is kind of an example of a basic one you did. Asynchronous models are very simple. Give me a second, guys. I don't know what's going on. I thought I had everybody muted. Oh. I have some feedback. If you're muted, unmuted, can you mute yourself? Sorry, it sounds like we have some out of the jail of muteness. So one of the big things that we have here is an asynchronous learning. Sorry, guys. I got a lot of feedback on my side. The big thing about asynchronous learning is asynchronous learning, students, they still need the equipment ahead of time or the week before so they can kind of gather. Give me a second. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I got to figure out what's up with. There we go. Perfect. Back to screen sharing. Okay. So asynchronous teaching model is very simple. Asynchronous teaching model is when kids are going, their goal is to at least try to move 30 minutes lessons twice a week. That's what I kind of was hoping for in the spring, but yours might depend on different things. You can still do similar stuff. It's just you have to kind of give short explanational videos as you go, which is kind of important. So with the asynchronous learning lessons, you need to make sure that you really have that lesson focus. The kids need to know what they're doing. I used to shoot 3 to 5 minute videos at the beginning of my asynchronous lessons last year, kind of just explaining all the stuff we're going to talk about here. And then the cool thing with asynchronous is I feel like I gave a ton of feedback to my kids, which was really nice. So one of the things, and if you were earlier in our earlier lessons, I use this as an example too, but this is from Will. He is the Shape America elementary toy. He created this activity, it was called storytelling yoga. And when I saw this in the spring, I was like, this totally fits in because I had to find a way to make a tumbling sequence without apparatus. So yoga is an easy one that I thought of. And a lot of people, this kind of can hit many different grade levels. But the cool thing about it was kids can still do it. So you can make a video, a 3 to 5 minute video. You could run through the poses with your kids. You could have your outcome. You could have your equipment and your instructions and everything listed. And it's all on a sheet. And it was all there. And the cool thing is, I would just upload all this into Google Classroom. And the nice thing that you could do is, this was Will's original design, was a piece of paper. I still uploaded this for kids because some kids are very much a fan of still writing their workout and then adding in their yoga poses. But this was a simple activity you could do. So after you did your 3 to 5 minute video, you could have the kids practice those skills. You could then also give them pictures, which I stole the pictures from Open. They're very simple you work with. And they have all these different resources out there. And all you'd have to do is, so the students would then take all the different poses that they would practice throughout the week. And I really didn't have any set deadlines. I gave them a week or two to do it, but they would then take a storytelling, and what they would do is take a book that they would read with their family, and then they would design a workout with it. So the students, you're making that classroom connections with it. But the idea was the students would take each picture or the story as it goes, and they would create a yoga flow with it. So you would start from, a standing position, going to the ground, back to the standing position, and they would do it. And the cool thing was with Google Classroom and the technology we have is they could write the story in the one side, they could add their pictures in the other side. So we have multiple different mediums that you could use with your students as they're going through. And they got to name their pose, they got to do all the different work in it, and it was a cool medium. If a kid didn't want to do the posters and that, they could also upload video. The nice thing is with the digital medium we have now, is kids can upload their assessments in many different forms. And I really, as long as it meets the standard, I'm cool with it and then it works. because kids are in a different scenario in their learning environment when they're in an asynchronous environment. Another good example of asynchronous teaching was Ross. I know he's in here. He's been on the side bar. Ross, he did his bit emojis. I know this was his virtual field day from the fall. It was really cool that every picture of Ross here was a different activity that he had. The nice thing about the bit emoji and asynchronous learning is that they are very cool because you can kind of have a picture of what you're doing and maybe what your gym looked like. It'd be nice if you have the ability to go into your building, snap a couple pictures, design your lesson there, and then add yourself in through the bit emoji. Very simple way of adding it in, but then each of the pictures of Ross there is a different activity in his lesson. Some people also did the same thing where they had them in like a step-by-step progression. So kids could move from one step of their asynchronous learning. So they did their warm-up to then maybe skill development cues and videos or GIFs. Then they moved into their skill development activities. And then the final one was an assessment. So a very simple way that you can kind of add it in there, work it around, and have some fun with it. Sorry, I'm checking the chat side, everybody. Thank you, Andy, for posting the looking to create a Bitmoji classroom in there, and everybody else that's posting stuff. Sweet. So in the asynchronous teaching model for secondary, you can still do the same thing. You can still have good, solid lessons. It's just the approach of how you're going to do it. And if you are going to require equipment, if you're going to require a fitness band, or if you're going to require anything like soup cans or stuff, give your kids time to kind of get what they need to do around the house. Asynchronous lessons, same thing. Your times are going to be different. But the biggest thing is making sure you're still working towards those standards. Make sure you're really focused on that. And one that I really like at the middle school level that I thought was a very easy transition when I was writing curriculum in the spring was the spike ball is one of my favorite pieces of equipment ever, which is awesome for the middle school world. And so that's kind of where I created these templates in the spring. They all kind of were very simple, but what we did was we kind of made some of the very basic learning goals, vocabulary warm-ups. This is a sample from Open that I did last year at some point, but it's there. All you need to do is check it out. But the idea was I wanted to make it so kids could still do an activity at home and practice so that when they did have that ability to maybe open their bubble of when they're interacting with people or interacting with family members, they could also play a different type of recreational activity. So the cool thing is there's a ton of different resources out there that you can look for. Then I've tried to highlight a couple of them as you go, but you could look at, for an asynchronous lesson, you can give kids still the cues. You could do GIFs of the cues. You could do visuals of the cues. You could do just written cues. There's many different ways of doing it. And with this lesson, the key is you could take videos and you could use a small spike ball, and the kids you do this as a gamification activity where they start at level 1, they work on a below the chest pass, then they work on above the chest pass, then a combination of the two, and then they work at the higher levels as they go. But you could do this for one day with the students, or you could do this as a synchronous or asynchronous lesson, and it would work out really well. But this is kind of the focus. So kids can work on those skills as they're going. They can work on those skill-related fitness components as they go along with this activity. And it really aligns really well. It's just a simple, different activity they could do. If you were looking at having twice a week with an ABC model, you could also then add different activities where you would have day 1, day 2, something like a partner passing pentathlon card. The different one is they could then record their skills. They could see themselves growing as they go throughout that period of time. It's a very simple look that you could look at. So I really like spike ball and also that small ball because it can be used in so many different variations of activities that kids could use in their house. So like a 6.5-inch ball or a 4-inch ball, something small, and you can pretty much get them anywhere. Assessment wise, there's a ton of stuff out there. I was trying to scramble to get this presentation together in a week, so I know there's a lot of open in it, but it's very simple. But Fitness for Life, if you didn't know, Fitness for Life has a lot of good web resources for teachers and for students. Please check them out. I know there's a ton of stuff there if you're teaching a lot of middle school, high school in those books. There's a ton of electronic resources to check out that you can share with your students or upload into Google Classroom. But this was a cool one too. SEL is very important right now. So there's different SEL material into many of the different open things. There's a lot of SEL out there. You can look at the CASEL standards. but it's also a good way of kind of working in many different opportunities and starting to understand your student in a different way without seeing them face-to-face in this asynchronous model. So the next model we're going to talk about is a dual model. I think a dual model is a really cool model because it's the best of both worlds. And a dual model means you're going to be teaching both synchronous one day a week and asynchronous later in the week. And it allows you to kind of get the best of both worlds because it allows you to see your students. You can get to meet them in face to face, but then you kind of can also interact with them later. And some schools will not be calling it a dual model. They might be a synchronous model with some asynchronous parts, but there are different ways that you can look at it. Okay, before I move on, I am checking out the comments real fast. I think I accidentally muted Jason. I'm sorry, Jason. There's too many of you all talking, but so the dual mode, here we go. So the dual model is what I came up with, and this is kind of my brainchild hybrid that I finished up today. So the idea of a dual model would be you're live and self-paced. So kids would do an early in the week live lesson where kids would be introduced to the concept, skill, or unit. Then it would be a synchronous lesson. You would then have that self-paced extension as the week went on to the prior class, where that would be where your asynchronous learning would occur with your reflection, assessment, and like feedback. It would all be placed there. And the cool way of doing this is this dual model would allow students then to have the best of both worlds. So in your first lesson, and I really tried to focus a little more on middle school in this, but if we were doing the spike ball, good example. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. So with the spike ball, this is not a spike ball, by the way, but this is a beach ball. Spike ball's here on the ground. You could use your skills and you could do your live lesson at the beginning of the week. You can show your students that, for an underhand pass, you're going to have that palm is open, you're hitting it up in the air. If you're hitting an above the chest pass, your fingers are going to be up. You can demonstrate the skills. You can have these kids doing the interaction with you, and you can really talk through your concepts and how to move, your skill-related components. You can really focus on the good teaching aspects in that synchronous lesson. The kids might not be getting as much feedback, but they're getting the interaction, and you're seeing how their form looks. And during the different parts of the lesson, you can then stop, do those polls, do that information, really design it where you're going to use the ball. But after you do that, you would then go back to, say, an asynchronous point of view where later in the week, by the way, here was a set example. I should have gone to this slide first. But you could have done a Tabata, something simple for your warm-up live. Then go into that like under and above chest passes that I was showing you. You could work through explaining your cues, practicing. You could also provide general feedback between the levels. And you could have a self-assessment as a Google form all there for you. You could use that same chart that we had. So if this was more of a self-paced week, the self-paced part for the second part of the week, you could give them a derby workout, maybe the passing pentathlon, a mindfulness activity, and a complete, maybe a weekly checkpoint. And you could even give them where if they want to do more days of the week to work off of, it would be a very simple thing they could do. So that's where we would be if we did a dual model. The dual model aspect is really cool because it allows kids to also explore. I think if you were doing an outdoor education model, or if you were doing a more of a fitness ed model, you could do it really simply that way. First lesson of the week, like so outdoor education, say you're doing like a hiking, or you're looking at like a walking wellness. First class of the week, you learn how to use Google tools. You learn how, making sure your stride, you can look at your, what do you need to make a successful physical activity experience outside. You could work out a plan of how many days you're going to walk. Then you could implement that plan going into the week. So many different ways that you could approach this material and kind of move with it. So I'm going to check the chat box because I know that was a lot real fast. So I'm going to try to find Jason. Give me a second, everyone. I have to stop sharing and find him again. Somehow I had to mute him too in the process. There you are, Jason.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. There you are.
Awesome. Lots of positive feedback. You're killing it here. There's a lot of wonderful advice going back and forth, especially about students who are hesitant to turning on their screens and making sure we're staying culturally relevant and not really forcing them to turn on their screen if they're not comfortable turning on their video. There was a question, someone wanted to know about YouTube, if anyone is doing any live streaming on a YouTube channel.
I know that some of the things that came up with, so if they don't want to turn their video on, it's fine. If you do use video assessment, when students sent in things, if they did not feel comfortable sending it, you can just have them draw the pictures, the cues, or the steps. Very easy ways of doing it. That's why I kind of looked at the assessment version of, as long as the assessment met the criteria of the standard I was looking at, I was fine. So some kids went really detailed into their different assessments they did. Some, did the videos. Some would just, draw it out, tell their story with paper, and the parent would take a picture of it. I'm fine with any of the options as long as the understanding of that standard is there. But it also depends on your grade level that you're doing. Any other questions right now? We're kind of at that 45-minute mark where I was hoping to be at. Any other questions? We are going to be sending these out. If you just kind of, my plug real quick, Shape Maryland has done numerous PDs this summer. They're being uploaded to the website. We have multiple different PDs going. Our next one is a skills-based health one on August 20th. It's I don't remember the topic at the top of my head right now, but we have another one scheduled there. We're also going to continue these webinars into the fall and into our virtual physical education conference in November, since we have moved online in Maryland. It says, can someone from Virginia join Shape Maryland for free as well? Yes, we are an equal opportunity employer. Like, I'm a member of multiple different organizations, so I can say yes. You can also join Shape America. You can do any of the different ways you want to join. So remember, advocacy is very important here. So it's kind of where we are. Any other questions, any comments, any really good suggestions? I know there was a ton of stuff. One time I looked at the side chat screen, we had 100 different comments there. So, by the way, if you need anything, Shape Maryland is also working on resources. We have a couple different resources coming out very shortly. Our goal is to get them by the middle of the month. We have some standards ideas. We have some best practices lessons. We have hand washing lessons coming for educators when we do go face-to-face. Our idea is if you have any lessons and want to submit them, we are looking for lessons to give and share each other's creations. I know there's a lot of different stuff out there, but we're trying to do it too. But thank you everybody for hanging out today. If you have any questions, you can send me an email, find us on social media. Thank you very much for hanging out today. Hopefully you got something, a tidbit out of it. Remember, quality physical education occurs wherever you are in the world. So hope you had fun with it. Thank you very much, everyone.
And the Shape Maryland convention will be in November 14th, all virtual.
All virtual, November the 14th.
Additional details, TBD.
Yeah.